Hello, welcome to cEDH Budget Brews. I'm Tim, and tonight, continuing our series of beginner cEDH Metabusters, we're going to cover Rograkh Silas Turbo Naus. But before we get started, please check out our Discord and our Patreon. Links are in the description below. And if you like our content, please hit that like, share, subscribe. Really helps out a lot. And I'm joined by my sultry co-host, Brandon. How you doing, boss?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm good, man. Shall we get going?
Let's go.
All right. So, Rograkh Silas Turbo Naus is a Grixis Ad Nauseam deck that leverages Thassa's Oracle. This particular build is curated and piloted by Bryant Cook of the Epic Storm. Very long time Ad Nauseam player in Vintage and Legacy. Over the past 6 months, maybe a year, kind of took a deep dive into cEDH. A refresher, because actually Bryant made probably one of the first known popularized cEDH decks called Brian's Pile of Broken, way back in the day. I mean, I'm talking 2006. Back on websites you've probably never even heard of, dude. You ever heard of MTG The Source?
No, actually.
Yeah. MTG The Source was the old school place to get all the things. It was like old school Reddit, man. So Silas is really in the deck mostly for colors because we want blue-black if we're going to go burr. But Silas is a 2/2 human artificer for 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 colorless. Has Death Touch, and then has a triggered ability of whenever Silas deals combat damage to a player, you may cast a artifact from your graveyard till this turn. So you target one, and then you can cast that one till end of turn, basically. Not super relevant most of the time. I mean, it can help you rebuild, technically, but really the reason why we're playing this is for this little guy right here. Rograkh, Son of Rog, is a 0-drop Kobold Warrior, legendary creature, 0/1, with first strike, menace, trample. None of those are relevant. Has partner, only relevant because now you got 2 more colors. We really just want it because it's a legendary creature and it costs 0. That's it. So having the ability to have a 0-drop commander opens up a lot of fast mana that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. So some of the spicier ones are Mox Amber becomes a Mox Ruby on turn 1. Springleaf Drum now costs 1 to make 1 mana. We can play Paradise Mantle, which just gives us another kind of 1 mana rock, which is nice, which is just kind of nice early game. You kind of see this deck is going to illustrate the pace at which the upper end of the speed of cEDH. And then we also get Moonsnare Prototype, which not only does it act as a piece of fast mana, it also doubles as removal because of the channel ability. Then we get a couple of extra rituals. We get Calling of the Week. Some decks will run Infernal Plunge also, which makes 1 red into 3. Bryant is not on that. And then the other thing that's really big is that being in Grixis and having a 0-drop commander gives you access to 3 free pieces of interaction as soon as you can cast your commander. So from your first turn on. You get Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swat, and Deadly Rock. Because of the speed at which that it can deploy its commander, it just has it's one of the decks that has one of the larger suites of free interaction available to it the fastest. It's not to say that you can't play a Crom or a Timna or some other commander early on turn 1 in these colors. It's that you can do this so consistently. So this deck is packing for free interaction, Force of Negation, Force of Will, Mental Misstep, Mindbreak Trap, Pact of Negation, Fierce, Swat, Rollick, and Daze. That's 8 free pieces of interaction. That's most of it is online, and all of it's online from turn 1 on.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, that's a lot. So it can advance its board state while interacting at the same time. Okay. And then because you have access to things like a very fast, so like one of the big lines with this deck is you can play a land, play your commander, tap for black, and then play Calling of the Week. And now you've turned 1 mana into 4, and you don't have to pay, because a lot of other decks you have to at least cast a mana dork or some kind of 1-drop or something, so you're mana neutral. Whereas this makes it positive. Also, oftentimes, like if you just have like a Mox Amber, now you're talking like the lines for you to be able to execute a turn 1 or turn 2 Ad Nauseam with this deck are infinitely higher than pretty much every other deck in the format. Like I'm talking like speed, like Godo fast, like Selvala fast, actually faster than Selvala, because Selvala cost double green to get into play, which is harder. So Selvala is like turn 3. So this deck is at least as fast as Godo, has more interaction, but the downside to it is the skill cap, or the skill floor, because this deck has a pretty high skill floor. I know that proverbial, playing Oracle is not hard, playing Naus is not hard, but doing it on such tight resources before you Naus is a kind of a thing that requires a lot of skill. So
if I may say,
mm-hmm.
I wanted to mention, as an agreement to your argument, playing something like Kess, where it's, double consult into a Thoracle win, even that's difficult. And you have 4 mana there, and that's typically on like turn 3 or 4.
Right.
And you're doing this on turn 1, so you have tighter mana.
Yeah.
Tighter mana, it's faster, and you have more mana to spend in order to get to your win.
Well, and you have to sequence it correctly is the thing.
Right.
Like because you have to be able to like convert this into that, into this, into that, and then back and forth a bunch. And so it kind of leads you to, I mean, the end result is the same, as that you play a Breach and then you win with Thassa's Oracle. But navigating to that can be a challenge, and you have to know your lines, and you have to be able to like basically play them blindfolded. Mm-hmm. For example, like he's been playing Ad Nauseam decks since Ad Nauseam was printed. Like literally. Because he's been playing, like he was one of the people who really took over like the Epic Storm archetype in Legacy and in Vintage, and has been piloting it ever since. So I mean, that's well over a decade. Like longer than a decade. I'm just making it round off the top of my head. So for him, the skill isn't too much of a floor. But for people who are learning cEDH, this can be very frustrating, and you can punt a lot, but it will reward your skill once you get it down. And your opponents will have a hard time, like especially in like newer play groups with like newer players have a hard time being that disciplined and keeping the interaction up. Like, for example, the reason why I played Cody as opposed to playing a deck like this was because it will, while in budgetless, performs really well. It doesn't budget as well, because once you start cutting out things like Mox Diamond and Mana Crypt and stuff like that, you start cutting yourself off of part of what makes this deck so good, and your mana starts getting a little bit more difficult because you're not running all the dual lands, all the fetches, and all the soul lands and everything that you would be able to play otherwise. Also, your tutors are not as good, blah, blah, blah. So like with Cody fixes your mana. You have a built-in tutor, so it's super consistent. It's not as fast. It's like turn 3, whereas this is turn 2. Kind of the same thing with Selvala. Like Selvala is turn 3, this is turn 2. Not to say that games don't go past that, but like that's where like if this deck is before you in a pod and you go land dork and you don't have free interaction, you're dead. And even if you do have free interaction, they're probably got protection, and you need at least one other player to have interaction, because that's the window. Like this deck does not plan for the long game. It can grind somewhat, but not as well as say like something like Blue Farm or something. So that is something of note. But so basically you power out a Naus really fast, turn 1, turn 2. You assemble either the like Underworld Breach with the with Lion's Eye Diamond, because we're playing a big boy deck. Don't have to do Lotus Petal. And then Brain Freeze to kind of self-mill to fill your breach. Or you just Naus into Tainted Pact / Consult and win with Oracle. And that's all this deck does. And then it's going to protect that, and it has enough interaction to kind of force that through early under slim resources. It does have some ways to rebuild. Breach is one of them. Yogg's Will is one of them. If there's a lot of wheels, Mean Betrayal gets really good because you can just play all your opponent's spells now. Haha. But the big thing with this deck is like it turns J-Will on turn 1. Like if you go land, Rite of Flame, then you got a free rock, like you're J-Willing for like 7 plus flipping 3 cards. Like you're good, baby. You're good. You know what I'm saying? The last like kind of redundant backup wincon is Praetor's Grasp. That if you can cast that a couple of times, I mean, usually even once you can like assemble a win. But if you can cast it twice off of like a breach, then you definitely can steal somebody else's Consult Oracle. So, any questions?
No, but I do want to say that I'm impressed at how well this deck does without green. Like how fast and how much mana it gets. It's extremely impressive in these colors.
So actually, that kind of brings to a very interesting point about cEDH, especially like cEDH compared to like lower power levels in Commander, is that while you can do powerful things outside of cEDH, because the meta is relatively honed and it's a lot more predictable, even though there's like, I don't know, 100 and something decks that you could possibly go up against that are considered meta decks in some way, shape, or form. But playing all of these cards, like playing all of these really expensive, like Mox Diamond, LED, Mana Crypt, like that's a lot of money. Now, granted, most CH play groups 100% encourage proxying. We do as well, even though we're a budget channel. Secretly, we're really just a beginner channel. We definitely advocate proxying. But so being able to make all that mana is really off the back of these rocks and these rituals. The rituals are cheap, but I mean LED's $500. Like, so
I miss when it was $200.
I mean, I miss when it was $6.
Fuck you.
That's how much I paid for mine back in ye olden days. But I digress. But yes, you're so like at lower power levels and lower budget, you tend to see a lot more green, because green is what gives you that really explosive turns. But again, you gotta get around haste.
That's
like,
true.
If you could play a 1 mana dork that would instantly make you 3 mana, like how busted is that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right.
Well, that's what Mana Vault does.
Yeah.
It just costs $50.
I love Mana Vault. I have like 3 of them. I should probably get rid of like 2.
Yeah, hold on to them. They're gonna go back up. They just got reprinted, so they dropped. But anyway, so I think that basically covers the gist of it. We will link the Epic Storms channel. You can watch some gameplay. We will also link this deck list in the description as well. I don't really have anything else. I think I've kind of covered at least the basics. Because a lot of it we've gone over with other, like, over this deck and that deck. So a lot of it's kind of, there's a lot of overlap. It's really the differences, the speed. So, all right. So with that, I would like to bid you adieu. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.